Hey, we're back with another edition of Community Matters. I'm Jim Cameron, your host of this program. This is a show where we talk to folks in town who are making a difference, local nonprofits, non-government organizations. And our guest today is Janet King. She is the executive director of the Community Fund. Good to have you on the program again, Janet.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks for having me.
Now, we'll talk about what the Community Fund does, but let's talk a little bit about your background. How long have you been in this job, and what's your professional background?
Well, I've been with the Community Fund now for just about 3 years. Prior to that, I was with Person to Person as the volunteer director for about 8 years. And I actually hail from the great state of Ohio. I am a Buckeye. I graduated from The Ohio State University. And immediately I moved to New York City. I was in the retail business for a while and then moved to the West Coast with my husband and worked in the fitness industry for about 15 years. We then relocated pretty much after 9/11 back to Darien to be in a small town, to raise our kids here, and we love it here. So that's what I've been doing.
Wonderful. Well, how long has the Community Fund been around and under one of its many names? And you can talk about that history.
Since 1951. And it was begun because the then first selectman wanted to pay attention to the human services needs in the local community. So it was started back in 1951. It's had a variety of names throughout the years. The Community Fund, it was part of the United Way, branched out about 20 years ago and became the Community Fund of Darien. And I like to say that we help people. That's what we do.
Well, the mission statement on your website is rather terse and well put. It says, our mission is to inspire people and mobilize resources to strengthen our community. Our vision is for all community members to have the opportunity to reach their full potential in healthy, educated, and self-sufficient individuals. Now, who could argue with that? But who is it that you're helping to achieve those goals?
We're helping the greater community of Norwalk, Stamford, and Darien. We raise close to $1 million every year. I like to say we depend on 60 of our neighbors who become volunteers and go out and vet those social service agencies that apply for community investment funding. So they are the eyes and ears of our organization so that we invest our donors' dollars very well and securely. We tend to fund anywhere between 25 to 30 organizations a year, and most of that funding goes into Norwalk and Stamford, and about 5% stays in Darien.
So, you say you came from person to person. So the Community Fund itself does not provide the services. You are, in effect, a clearinghouse to raise money for the community, and then you disperse it to the various organizations that actually do the good works, right?
Exactly. We are a funder. Yes.
Right. And also from your website, which is replete with information and helpful to my research, you talk about basic needs, reducing food insecurity, moving individuals from homelessness to stable housing, providing emergency assistance programs, and guiding clients toward greater self-sufficiency. So who are the people that are in need of those kind of assistance?
A lot of these folks are folks who have recently immigrated. They may be new to the area. They need that safety net of services. They're hardworking. Some are working 2 and 3 jobs to make ends meet, but they do need the help of that safety net. They do need food supplements, or they may need a little extra help with their rent. They are heading towards self-sufficiency, and our goal is to help them further and more quickly.
And I know from person-to-person experience, your experience and mine and my family's, that food insecurity is an issue. People are actually hungry in these neighboring towns. Is that true?
Well, it's nationally 1 in 5 are hungry. We use the word food insecurity, but it basically means hunger. And I think that has become more complicated during COVID. A lot of folks who had regular jobs, like someone who is a hairstylist or someone who worked in a restaurant, when those individuals were shut down because their work stopped, they were seeking that safety net. So we saw an increase, and now it's more than leveled out. But now what we're facing are increased food costs, and I'm sure everyone has noticed that in their own marketing at the grocery, that food costs have increased substantially during COVID. So folks are still hungry. Yes.
And housing, are there people who are homeless in these communities?
There are homeless, but interestingly, the moratorium on rent was lifted on December 31st. And, we were all a little nervous there was going to be a huge influx, but so far so good. We have not seen as many requests, but I'm sure those will be coming down the pike.
And emergency assistance, what kind of assistance do people have? What kind of emergencies are they facing?
What happens is someone might have a flat tire or their car breaks and they can't get to work. And for you or I, or for most people, that would be somewhat of a financial hardship. But for these folks, it's quite a challenge. Do I get the tire fixed? How am I going to get to work? Or do I put food on my table? So the emergency assistance comes in handy with supporting folks if they need to pay an unseen medical bill, or they need a nebulizer for their child. They need to pay for that tire to be repaired. It's so helpful in getting them over that small financial hump.
And then the fourth point you mentioned is you want people to move toward greater self-sufficiency. So to play devil's advocate, how can they become self-sufficient when they're constantly seeking a handout?
Well, first of all, let me say that after working at PDP for 8 years and being on the front line, most of these folks don't want to be asking for a handout. It's a temporary situation. Providing help in workplace development, skills for work, teaching people how to fish.
Instead of giving them a fish.
Exactly. So it could be education, it could be skills, it could be financial literacy. I talked to a client once that she said, I didn't even know what that meant. Now that, I've taken this financial literacy class, I now understand that I can put a little bit away, I can save a little bit, and it will grow in case I have that emergency. So a lot of the clients that do seek services just need some education and support.
Mm-hmm. So who are the organizations that are making those sort of missions possible?
Person to person. Open Door Shelter, Inspirica. I mean, there's a slew of them in Fairfield County that are making that difference and providing that workforce development.
So they come to you at the community fund,
mm-hmm.
and they apply for grant money.
Yes.
What's that application process like? Are they asking for a specific amount? What kind of diligence do you apply to those applications?
So yes, organizations apply for a specific amount. First of all, they must fall into one of our funding buckets, as we call them. There are funding goals. So there's basic needs, youth success, workforce development, and community health. Community health means access to mental health, physical health care. If they don't fall into one of those four categories, then they won't be funded. And we have a committee called the Community Investment Committee, who reviews all of those applications. So there's application step 1. And then once they pass that hurdle and they're vetted by our 60 volunteers who are community investment volunteers, then they move on to the next part of the application. And then they are vetted, and we decide through the community investment volunteers who we fund. And those grants range from anywhere from $5,000 to $40,000. And annually we give out about $700,000 a year. So it does make an impact.
And how do these community volunteers who are on your team do that vetting? Let's say there's an existing nonprofit like Inspirica.
Yep.
They may have received money in the past. Does that automatically mean they're going to get more?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily, but we're very careful about that. We have long-term relationships with our grantees, so we are able to provide advice and consult. It's not common that we don't continue to fund the same, but it does happen on occasion. And the community investment volunteers are put on a team of 8 people. It's called a panel. There's a panel leader. They meet 3 or 4 times. And in most years, they have gone and taken a visit to the organization on site, which is really important and valuable. But in the last couple of years, everything has been done virtually, obviously for safety reasons. But that is how they get to know each of those organizations. And the panel is assigned to 3 or 4 local nonprofits. And then they come back, they regroup, and they analyze each one and then provide that information to us. Another part of that process is we have the investment committee. So they review the 990s, all the financial information from the organizations to make sure that they are sound.
What's a 990?
It is essentially the tax form that a nonprofit submits.
So you're actually drilling down into their bookkeeping and where the money is being spent.
Mm-hmm.
And you're, I guess, pretty confident that your donors' money that you're passing on to these organizations is being spent as applied for.
Exactly. Our donors trust us.
Janet King is the executive director of the community fund in Darien. She's been there for a couple of years, came from person to person. Does person to person have an inside track on your donations? Or
I'm impartial. I have to be.
You also mentioned that one of your other buckets, that one of the things you'd like to spend money on is youth success. Now, what do you mean by that? Isn't there enough pressure on our kids in this town already to be successful without you piling on?
Well, not just this town, but if you think of the kids who are in Stamford and Norwalk, there's kindergarten readiness, there's STEM programs, the promotion of leadership development, especially with kids in high school and middle school. So those are the sorts of programs that we like to fund.
Mm-hmm. You also do a number of kind of community events. I know you have one coming up dealing with vaping and edibles and drugs, and the police chief's going to be there. You do those on a regular enough basis too, right?
Yeah, another part of our work is being a community builder. We're not just a philanthropy educator, we're also a convener. We convene the Thriving Youth Task Force, which is the local prevention council. There's one in every town in the state of Connecticut. So we serve as the fiduciary for the Thriving Youth Task Force. And in addition to the Thriving Youth Task Force, we had, for the past 7 years, were funded by a state grant. And the state grant helped us to provide education to the local community, educating students on the risks of drinking alcohol and educating adults on the risks of social hosting laws. Now, we had 7 years of funding, which just ended because we had this incredible opportunity to receive a very competitive grant from the federal government through the CDC, and it's called Drug-Free Communities Grant. And that allows us to focus on 2 substances, which interestingly, we had to put in the grant application before marijuana legislation was approved in the state of Connecticut. So the 2 substances that we will now be focusing on are alcohol and marijuana.
And you were prescient enough to realize that it looked like marijuana was going to be legalized in the state, right?
Yeah, we kind of felt that way. So the interesting thing about this grant is Westport, Greenwich, Wilton, Norwalk, they've all had this grant or have just received. I think Fairfield is new to the fold. It's to help reduce substance use among the youth. And that's why we're having the program about vaping and edibles. And, as they say, it's the new marijuana. And it's absolutely true. And we partner, our Thriving Youth Task Force has, I believe it's close to 70 members from the local community. Some are mental health professionals. We have the police force, the depot, all different youth organizations and professionals who join in to create programming to educate the local community. And with this federal grant, it just gives us more of an ability to do so.
What about substance abuse by adults?
Well, with that, we haven't covered. Our focus is on youth.
I see.
We also convene the Human Services Planning Council, which has been around, I think, since the 40s. And that was begun by the first selectman as well. And that engages individuals in our community, and we meet monthly to discuss human service issues in Darien.
Another one of the buckets into which you
Yeah.
invest your donors' money is community health. Um, what's the health problem in our community? Is there one? How are you addressing it, if so?
It's very difficult for some families, especially in Norwalk and Stamford, to access healthcare. Physical healthcare, mental health care, substance abuse treatment programs. So those are organizations like AmeriCares in Norwalk that we do fund.
And is it supplemental to whatever the state is providing in terms of insurance coverage, or is it that there aren't doctors that they can go see? Is it the cost of going to a primary care physician as opposed to showing up at a emergency room?
Yes. Actually, these local clinics help reduce emergency room visits by 30%.
Have you been doing anything around COVID during these times?
No, we did help with getting food to folks in Norwalk and Stamford through the Corbin Cares Project.
Right.
Some work
Right.
there. And then we also, through our Human Services Planning Council, I work directly with Allie Ramstack at Town Hall, who heads up the Social Services Department, Human Services Department. And we have a separate fund called Touch a Life, which is designated just for Darien residents. And we were able to help folks with rent. One family sadly lost a member to COVID, and we were able to help with the funeral expenses. We've helped with grocery store gift cards so that folks would have food. So there's a variety of expenses that we help with. It could be a heating bill, et cetera. Most importantly, keeping folks from being evicted.
And the eviction moratorium has passed, but do you have a sense from these other agencies you work with whether people are getting tossed out on the street now?
Not yet. Not yet.
Thanks to your assistance and other groups?
Well, our assistance, other organizations, and the fact that, the moratorium, I think perhaps some of the landlords were lenient. I'm not sure, but we have not seen a huge swell just yet.
One of the other things that you just recently launched that I want to spend a fair amount of time on is called the Volunteer Hub.
Mm-hmm.
What is that? Why did you feel impelled to start that?
Well, part of our mission is to inspire people and to mobilize resources. So when we were talking, we had some focus groups during COVID to find out what was important to people. And one of the things we found with Darien residents is that they want to volunteer, but they don't know how to get started. Now, being a former volunteer director, I found that to be astonishing. And what we found was Darien residents, they want to volunteer. There's so much time and talent to be given, but they just didn't know where to get started. So we have two incredible volunteers who are staffing our volunteer hub. They respond within 24 hours and they meet individually with anyone who wants to volunteer who's a Darien resident. And we assess what they want to do. Do you want to work with animals? Do you want to work with youth? Do you want to work with seniors? And then we plug them into a local organization in Fairfield County, and it could be one that we don't fund, that they can volunteer with. We then follow up with that volunteer, and we also follow up with the agency to make sure things are working out. We want to launch these folks into a successful volunteer adventure.
And how's the response been since you started the Volunteer Hub?
Pretty good. We launched it in November, which was around holiday time, and things we're getting out a little more in public. Now things are a little more locked down due to COVID. So we have had lots of interest, and I think that'll peak once we're a little more free from this pandemic.
But you get the sense that people are still interested in volunteering. They may just be reticent to go out in person to some third-party institution. And
well, and a lot of places that utilize volunteers had to kind of clamp down on that during COVID because of the issues. So we're hoping that will open up very soon. But it's really volunteers for volunteerism. So we literally just launched it.
And who is it that's stepping forward and saying, I want to volunteer? Is it high school kids, looking to pad their resume for college?
It's
Is it retirees? Is it folks who are now not wasting 2 hours a day on the train commuting, and they're working from home, and they want to get out of the house? Or is it
it's
all the above?
it's all of the above, and it's also, we've had a lot of new folks move into town, and it's a great way to meet people. So we've had some new residents who have called in. Mhm.
Well, I'm going to put a website address and a phone number in the credits to this program in a moment here, so you can find out more about the Volunteer Hub. Janet King, our guest, she is the executive director of the Community Fund of Darien. No stranger to nonprofit work here in town from her previous incarnations in other good works as well too. Uh, you did something last year that I think you're going to replicate in the spring of this year, called Mission Possible. And we have a little video I thought we could show here that explains what it is, and then we can talk about how it worked the first time. You might recognize the voice. So
Yes.
here's a video that was produced for Mission Possible.
Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to join the Community Fund of Darien in a week-long virtual competition. Introducing Mission Possible. Form your own team. New mission. Complete challenges on the app. Mission complete. But watch out. The whole town is playing. This April 1st through the 3rd. A socially distanced game for players of all ages. Prove your skills in challenges both physical and mental. Register today at communityfunddarien.org. Will you answer the call? Mission Possible.
Wow. So Mission Possible. You did it last spring, and now you're going to be doing it again in April of 2022. What's the
Yes.
idea behind this?
Well, we came up with this concept during COVID because we were all locked down and we wanted again to build community. It's part of our mission. We found this program, the system that you could buy. We had a few generous sponsors that helped us with that, and some volunteer local talent, including Kathleen Cameron, who donated her time and talent to make that video, and Jim, who's our voiceover. Thank you. And it really took off. We had about 60 teams compete. The individuals, we kept it at a very low cost because we wanted more people to join in. And you are assigned missions, and there's simple things like stacking 30 pennies, or going out and trying to find someone that can teach you a sentence in Spanish. We also found that we could educate the community about what our local nonprofit agencies do. So they were able to collect used books and donate them to a local agency. It was a lot of fun. We tied in local businesses. We were overwhelmed with the success of it. And we now have had people asking us, when are you going to do it again? So we decided that April Fool's Day was a good day to launch it. And we have shortened the time to make it over a weekend. So it launches April 1st through the 3rd. Signups are not available yet. We're not there yet, but we hope to see a lot of participation.
And given the competitive nature of most people in Darien, these teams really took to the challenges and were pretty competitive with each other, right?
Exactly. And I have to say, every day you'd see their submissions, and there were people doing the chicken dance or trying to sing a song, and people just generally had fun and got out and made the best of it. So we were very pleased with it.
And they were competing for some prizes, not just bragging rights.
Yes, there were prizes, and interestingly, the prize for first place was some gift cards to local organizations, and the team that won actually donated a pretty substantial portion of their winnings back to the community. So that was refreshing.
Very nice. That's Mission Possible. So stay tuned to TV 79 for full enrollment information. part of that community building was you have done, and by the time this program airs, we'll have done another community supper.
Mhm.
What was that about?
So community dinners arose because people were locked down, and we wanted to support local business, local restaurants, and we wanted to surprise and delight local residents. So what we did was, it was kind of taken off that the Bombas socks idea or the Tom's shoes idea, where you buy a meal and then half of your expenditure would go towards providing food for people. We are delivering meals that evening, and you can buy a meal for 6 or a meal for 2. There's some add-ons. There's a raffle for a gift card to Fresh Direct, so you can get great food for the Super Bowl, which is 2 weeks later. But the community has really embraced it. And I must say, as someone who delivered, especially on the first 3 dinners, people were genuinely happy to see you pull into their driveway with a meal and a bottle of wine. And it's just been a great fundraiser for us to, again, build community and give back to the community.
So this wasn't bringing together a bunch of strangers around a dinner table. It was more of a virtual community dinner then.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And part of the proceeds would go to help put food on the table of others that couldn't afford it themselves.
And the first dinner we included, it was kind of fun. We included little noisemakers, because that was back when every night we were ringing the bells. I believe it was on Saturdays at 6 to honor our first responders. So we tried to tie it in, and I think it worked out really well.
What other good works is the community fund involved with these days? What else are you looking to do?
Volunteerism is very important to us. So we have hosted the volunteer celebration every year for 43 years. And we honor those local unsung heroes who are nominated by local social service agencies, as well as individuals in our community who nominate their friends. And we used to host a luncheon, and we've kind of been put off the last few years because of COVID. But what we did was, we would show up at that individual's home with a big sign, think of Publishers Clearinghouse, take a photo and publicize that to honor that individual. We hope to be in person again in April. I believe it's April 21st. At the DCA, the Darien Community Association. We invite the general public. It'll be an informal gathering. We'll salute these unsung heroes at that event. And I do hope it takes place. We've been trying to do it for 3 years, so I hope it happens.
And that event is recorded every year and broadcast on TV 79 as well, too. So go to our archives if you want to see some of the previous winners.
The other thing that branched out of Mission Possible was Mission Positive. And we put it on our website, and it was during COVID, when families were looking for activities and things to do with their kids and their extended family to entertain and keep them busy. And people could post what they found interesting to do. And so we had Mission Positive on our website. We also, during the height of COVID, through the Human Services Planning Council, we had the Mask Brigade, because we found that local businesses and organizations, we couldn't get masks at one point, remember, way back when. So we had individuals who were making masks, and they could adopt an organization and provide those masks for them. So we did have the Mask Brigade, and that was very helpful in the community.
Wow. Janet King, Executive Director of the Community Foundation, Fund of Darien, our guest today on Community Matters. Anything else you want to add? Anything I forgot to ask you about in this litany of service to the community?
Well, we talked about the Drug-Free Communities Grant and what that has allowed us to do between the state grant and the federal grant. We have surveyed students in middle and high school through a partnership with the Darien Public Schools. It's been really interesting work to determine what their substance use is like, their mental health, their health patterns. It's the 7th survey since 2008. It's anonymous. We look at their relationship with their family and their friends, their mental health, their stress, and their substance abuse. And the results, which we provided to the community just a few months ago, it's really been interesting. And I'm not going to go into those specific results. They are available on our website. But we did see, because it was taken in February of COVID, there was a reduction in substance use. kids were spending more time online and social media. Surprise, right? They couldn't socialize, so they were socializing less and spending less time in sports activities. There was an increase in anxiety, sadness, and isolation. So these are things that we are addressing now with this funding from the CDC. But it's really interesting if you want to go to our website and take a look at the results. I think people will be educated on what's going on with our middle school and high school kids.
Great. Well, we're going to put that website address right down here at the bottom of the screen. You'll see that website address, and the credits will come up in a second with more contact information for the Community Fund of Darien. Janet King, Executive Director, our guest today on the program. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it, and we'll see you at Mission Possible.
Always
in
a
April.
pleasure. Thank you. Thank
Great.
you, Jim. Thanks.
And
Bye-bye.
thank you, our viewers, for watching another edition of Community Matters.